Thanks for listening to this podcast of Trending with Timmerie. If you haven't already subscribed, please catch us wherever you love to listen to your podcast, from the Relevant Radio app to Apple, YouTube, you name it, we are there. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to go and give us a 5-star review to help other people discover the podcast. Anything you share in terms of episodes, whether it's texting it to a friend, posting on social media, helps to build up the kingdom for God, to help confront the challenging issues we face as a culture, but with joy, with hope, and with an eternal perspective where our faith collides with everyday life, bringing eternal principles to help us live our life joyfully.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio.
January 22nd marks the 49th anniversary of legalized abortion across the United States of America on a federal level. We today will be sharing highlights from the March for Life that occurred in Washington, D.C. If you don't know, the March for Life is actually the world's largest annual human rights demonstration. That's the largest in the world. And it was incredible to see and hear the voices, to see the photos, that the future is pro-life. That you are not alone. Perhaps there have been moments in your life where you felt like, am I the only person who's pro-life? Well, if you've never attended a pro-life march or walk, the Walk for Life West Coast occurs tomorrow. That's Saturday, January 22nd. It's not too late. If you're within a few hour distance, I 10 out of 10 recommend take the time, go. Attend the Mass, go to the Walk for Life, do what you can. There's still walks happening across the nation, so you can learn more online, looking up your local Walk for Life and March for Life as well. And today, I again want to share with you some of the highlights from the March for Life, some of the speakers who shared during the show, during the actual presentation at the rally. Everyone from, for example, actor and producer Kirk Cameron, better known as Michael Sievers from Growing Pains, was actually one of the speakers. One of the comments made by the organizer of the March for Life, Jeannie Mancini, actually, she commented that this was the most excited group of marchers she had ever seen. The engagement, the excitement was so profound. Perhaps it's because the pro-life movement hasn't had the opportunity to come together in a couple of years because of COVID lockdowns, but I think more so it's because people recognize this fight over life, that next year marks 50 years of legalized abortion, that we're seeing a wave across the nation, a pro-life wave, and we very well may see the overturning of Roe versus Wade and the question of abortion returning to the states. As we already see states such as Texas making it illegal to have an abortion after a fetal heartbeat is detected. We see pro-life laws are changing the nation. They're changing and saving hearts and minds of mothers of children. So if you have a question today, we'd be glad to take it. The number is 1-888-914-9149, or you can comment live now on Instagram. I would be happy to take your question at Timmerie. Find me there. My handle, Timmerie. So let's talk a little bit about the kickoff of the March for Life. As I mentioned, we have many incredible speakers, some of whom we're going to hear. I'm bringing you glimpses of some of the speeches that were shared today on Trending. We're also going to talk about Roe versus Wade, its impact. We'll talk about post-abortion syndrome, the fact that nearly all children that would have otherwise been born potentially with Down syndrome are being obliterated here in the nation. And again, we'll take your questions, so feel free to call us or send them in on Instagram. Kicking off the march, we saw some of the youngest faces, and many of them, when I was looking at many of the video and photo shots, it was very, very inspiring to see that so many people were young. That says for those who have been a part of the pro-life movement for years, you have inspired, you have called, and you have challenged the next generation to step up, the next generation to speak up. So for all pro-life advocates of all ages, especially those who have been a part of this movement, who have inspired me and many others to be an advocate for the unborn, Thank you for getting us here to this point where we see a vivacious and joy-filled pro-life young movement. Jeannie Mancini, the president of March for Life Education and Defense Fund, gave some of the opening remarks. And I want to share with you a little bit about what she said to kick off this year's 49th annual March for Life in Washington, D.C. today.
Years of hard work and years of you coming here have brought us to this place today. And no matter how Dobbs is decided, your voice and the importance of that on the federal and state levels are all the more important. If Roe falls, the battle lines will change. But make no mistake, the fight for life will need to continue in the states and here in D.C. We need you to remain vigilant and ready for action. We need you to remain vigilant and ready for action. Are you up for the challenge?
The hard work of the pro-life movement has brought us here to this point. She mentions that Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health. That's the Supreme Court case that we will hear the final decision on in the coming months, the end of the spring, just as we enter into summer, usually delivered by the Supreme Court, those decisions in June. But may I emphasize for just a moment where she says the hard work of the pro-life movement has brought us here. The prayer, the sacrifices, the prayer, the intercession, the sidewalk counseling, the legal advocacy, the stories and testimonies, the social media campaigns, so many efforts, so many people in various ways who have stepped up and said, I am pro-life and I'm willing to do something about it. And we are now seeing a future where Roe versus Wade very well may be overturned. Now, we're seeing abortion numbers plummeting in some states, such as Texas, where pro-life laws have been passed. So regardless of whether or not we see the overturning of Roe versus Wade at the Supreme Court level, we are going to see this battle continue to come back to individual states. The battleground will change, but we will be there. And so as we heard the most excited crowd yet at the March for Life, as organizers have commented, we see the future is pro-life, and you are not alone. If you've been a part of this pro-life movement, it's a joy to be there. And I hope that, like me, you found that some of your greatest friendships, some of the most inspiring people you've encountered have been people who have been a vocal advocate for life. Participants at the March for Life today were invited and presented with a resource, and you can text MARCH to 73075 if you're interested in pro-life network updates. Again, they presented this as a resource to help mobilize people across the nation in the coming months as we see the battle over abortion continue with hope, with joy, but also knowing what to do. So you can text MARCH to 73075. We'll include that in the podcast notes for today's show. And Lucas, if you could go ahead and post that on social media now as well, that would be great. So one of the speakers who joined the March for Life today, and we'll hear from a number of them today on Trending, was actor and producer Kirk Cameron. Now, he's better known as Michael Sievers from Growing Pains, but I love his testimony that he gave at the March, talking about his wife, talking about the role of God inspiring us and calling us to this work. So just listen for a moment to part of actor and producer Kirk Cameron's comments. Again, that childhood star many of us know and love, Michael Sievers from Growing Pains.
Good afternoon, everybody. You know, I am from warm and sunny California, but it's also the land of loose nuts and bolts. I'd much rather be here in Washington, D.C. with you for the March of Life. There's no other place I'd rather be. Well, so excited to be here with you. I love to see your signs and your smiles and your hearts filled with love and compassion for moms and babies and families. Some of you, if you're under 20 years old, you might be saying, who's Mike Seaver? But listen, your mom and dad and I have known each other since the 1980s. Yeah, so just think of me as like the long-lost uncle you never knew you had. And some of you wouldn't even be here if it weren't for a movie called Fireproof. Ask your parents, they'll tell you the whole story. Why are we here? The Bible, the book that built America, says that those who hate God love death. But we're the family of faith. We love God, therefore we love life. And our hope is not in the White House. It's not in Congress. Our hope is not in the people who govern us or the laws that we make in this nation. Our hope is in the power of God working in the hearts of his people. And this issue of life is very personal for me. My wife is an adopted child. Chelsea was one doctor appointment away from not existing. Our first 4 children are also adopted. They were this close to not being here, and if my wife Chelsea had not been born, our 2 natural-born children would not exist either. So my 6 children and my wife are here as a result of loving, compassionate, and courageous people like you who are marching today at the March for Life. I hope that you have a chance later this year to see the movie Life Mark that is based on a true story. It is a story that is so much better than anything we ever could have scripted, but the makers of Fireproof and Courageous and War Room and I have teamed up to bring this film that highlights the value and preciousness of life in the womb and the beauty of adoption, explaining how one life can impact so many. You're adopted too. We're going to be marching together this afternoon. But after this day is over, I want us all to remember to continue the marching orders that have been given to us by our Commander-in-Chief, who lives in the heavenly places. And his executive orders trump all other executive orders.
Praise God. That is Kirk Cameron, the actor and producer, better known as Michael Sievers from Growing Pains. And here he is sharing his testimony of how his wife was adopted. And if you didn't know, yes, he indeed did marry Chelsea Noble, who was actually one of the actresses on Growing Pains as well. They're an incredibly pro-life and Christian family and have been ardent advocates for life. He shares, if you missed it, that his wife was adopted, their first 4 children were adopted, and then they went on to have 2 biological children. This is a reminder of the power of choosing life. The people who otherwise might not have had the opportunity to give birth to these children, people who otherwise might not have had the opportunity to have children, this is a great example of how important it is for us to understand that one yes can change the course of an entire culture, an entire family, an entire woman's life. If you or someone you know is facing an unplanned pregnancy, you can call a unplanned pregnancy line where there are counselors waiting and ready to help. The number is 1-800-394-4357. Again, that's 1-800-395-4357. And we'll post that in the podcast notes, as well as, Lucas, if you can post that on my social media as well, we'll get that posted on social media. If you or anyone you know is facing an unplanned pregnancy, there is that resource available to you. So that was Kirk Cameron, and a couple things that stood out from his talk, especially as people of faith. We have to remember that we are called by God to stand for the innocent, stand for injustices done to mothers and children. And he talks about how our hope isn't in Congress, isn't in the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, although these are very important things that must be advocated for, places in society that we must fill ourselves as pro-life people. But he reminds us that our hope is in the power of God and that we ourselves receive our marching orders from God himself. So let's talk now a little bit about Roe versus Wade. And if you have a question, the number's 1-888-914-9149. We're taking questions during this day as we approach January 22nd, this Saturday, marking the 49th anniversary of legalized abortion through the Supreme Court case of Roe versus Wade, as well as the companion case of Doe versus Bolton. The facts are shocking. We've seen over 62 million babies have been aborted in the United States alone since the Supreme Court decision of Roe versus Wade. If we were to average that out today with the rate of abortions, it's roughly about 1 in 4 babies are aborted. So for every 3 people, let's say, of your same age, there's 1 person missing today. When I give pro-life apologetics presentations in person, especially when working with youth, I'll look at them and I'll count off and I'll count 1, 2, 3, and I say missing a person. I say someone keep track. And let's say in a group of 20 people, if we were to just look at that group alone, we're missing 7-ish people. I'm good at math, but my brain cannot compute at the same time as being live here. And just thinking about the number of people who are missing, it's astounding to ponder the reality that abortion has left us missing friends, family, for some siblings, aunts, uncles, grandchildren. This is the impact abortion has had. And there are inconsistencies everywhere, even in the ruling of Roe versus Wade itself that's entered into our United States law. For example, even the inconsistency that, in fact, if someone murders a pregnant woman, he can be convicted for a double homicide. But if an abortionist or a woman chooses to have an abortion, that's not looked at as a murder. And this brings to mind the fact that, well, what's the difference between a child where the mother was murdered while she was pregnant and a child being chosen to be aborted? The only difference is that one child was wanted and one child was unwanted. In fact, what's fascinating, though, is even if that child was wanted and someone murdered a pregnant woman, because he murdered a pregnant woman, even if that child was unwanted, it maybe was intended by the mother to be aborted, that would still be a double homicide. You see, the legal protection for the unborn itself is inconsistent. It's incompatible with reason, with science. This is why we see the Supreme Court case of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health coming before the Supreme Court. And our 9 justices know that the current mode of operating when it comes to abortion, especially this whole idea of, quote, viability, is inconsistent and it's fudgeable. It can be changed. You see, viability currently is marked at 22 weeks. That is, it's understood by current medical technologies that we know that a baby's life can be saved if born prematurely at 22 weeks. And so what has happened? We've essentially seen that now current laws, and again, varying from state to state, that basically a baby's life won't be fought for unless that baby's 22 weeks old or older if born alive, even if intended to be an abortion. And grant, even if there is a violation of viability and that baby is over 22 weeks, if that baby was intended to be aborted and let's say that baby was born alive, well, what happens? Well, because it was intended to be killed through the process of an abortion, that baby is still left to receive no medical attention, is left for scientific experimentation by the dismembering of the baby's body. This is why undercover sting investigations, such as the work done by people such as David Daleiden, has been so important for us to understand. We've known as a pro-life movement for years that infanticide is occurring. That because there's this attitude of wanted versus unwanted that has snuck into our culture, that in the name of science, in the name of research, abortion clinics have been delivering babies born alive, and they've been using those babies and harvesting intact baby cadavers for the purpose of so-called scientific research. But as we know, Planned Parenthood has been caught red-handed, and they know this, and they've said it. You can watch the videos, you can listen to the audio, that they're just trying to make more money. It's about the bottom line, balancing the budget, showing that they can be more profitable, which is why they sell the aborted baby parts. They don't care about scientific research. They care about making more money, about promoting the abortion cause. This is the reality of abortion. And it's so important that we understand this. If you don't know how an abortion works, I'm going to describe to you just a couple types of abortion. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear this or think about it, but I really do believe it's a part of the testimony to the unborn, a testimony to the life that this child has lost. For us to know and understand indeed how this child died. Why is it that we can listen to gruesome news, but we can't listen to the reality of what's happening to innocent children today? And one of the most common types of abortions performed in the first trimester, sometimes even into the second, is known as a DNC abortion, dilation and curettage. What happens is the woman is dilated. A hollow tube is then inserted through the vaginal canal. A hollow tube that has a vacuum in it, basically, that goes in and pushes and breaks into the parts of the baby's body, breaking it apart and sucking down the vacuum the baby out. Then there's a curette that's taken in. It's like a little hook that goes in to scrape out the mother's uterus. Then a vacuum is used again to make sure that nothing was left. Now, what should occur after all of this happens is the parts of the baby are actually supposed to be reassembled. Now, this doesn't always happen, but the reason for this is the baby's supposed to be reassembled so that they know that they indeed removed all the pieces of the baby. So that they can make sure, hopefully, that no infection can settle in and occur. Unfortunately, many women actually do, because often abortion is not performed well, end up experiencing infection, blood clotting, and many side effects from abortions. But because it's a politically loaded issue, we don't hear about this. Did you know a lot of people will talk about mother mortality rates, the mortality rates of women? And when they talk about maternal mortality rates, they try to claim that having an abortion is more safe than having a baby today. But did you know that the way we record maternal mortality rates in the United States is we actually consider, under the grouping of maternal mortality, deaths related to abortion, deaths related to, yes, women who may die in the process of giving birth, which is rare but does occur. It also includes if a woman's pregnant and dies while pregnant, even if not related to the pregnancy. It also includes within a context of a certain amount of time after having a baby, if a woman dies after having had a baby non-related to having a child, that also is classified under a maternal mortality rate in the United States. So our maternal mortality rate is completely skewed. And if we were to look at research and studies worldwide, we would actually see that some of the places with the lowest ever maternal mortality rate, blowing even places such as the West, westernized medicine, the United States, blowing them out of the water with low maternal mortality rates, those are places that have no abortion. Places such as, before they legalized abortion, Ireland, even today, Poland. This is why some of the speeches we heard at the March for Life were a reminder for us of the reality of abortion. Father Mike Schmitz, who's known and loved for the Bible in a Year podcast, shared about how his pro-life speaking began when he was just in 8th grade. And he talks about one picture that was on the refrigerator of his childhood home and how that really influenced his pro-life position. And it's a reminder for us of the reality of abortion. We'll be right back here on Trending. We're going to hear more of the speeches from the March for Life that occurred in Washington, D.C. as we approach the 49th anniversary of the Supreme Court decision of Roe v. Wade that has ended the lives of so many children. It has hurt women, broken families, and it's time to recognize the pro-life future is here. We saw it today at the March for Life. It's in your homes. It's in your heart. We will see this end. Thank you to our longtime sponsor, Solidarity Health Share. Enroll now in Solidarity One, a new program with expanded options to fit any healthcare budget. Solidarity One offers access to prescription drugs and new discounts for seniors. Learn more about this exciting new healthcare at CatholicHealthShare.com.
Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
Welcome back to Trending. We are sharing updates from the March for Life in Washington, D.C. that occurred. If you have a question about abortion, numbers 1-888-914-9149. Tomorrow, that is January 22nd, marks the 49th anniversary of legalized abortion in the United States between Roe v. Wade and its companion Supreme Court case, Doe v. Bolton. Did you know that, in fact, this made not only abortion legal, but permissive, legal through all 9 months of a woman's pregnancy? The reasons for abortion, it didn't matter. It didn't have to be the health of the mother. It didn't have to be rape. It didn't have to be the health of the child. Any reason goes. The vast majority who choose to have abortions are for elective reasons. Over 99%, that is over 99 out of 100 abortions that occur, are due to just a reason that occurred. I've even talked to women being in front of the abortion clinic. Well, I don't want to be pregnant at prom. Well, I want to go to college. Well, I don't want to tell my boyfriend. I don't want to have a baby with this person. I don't want to have another child. Circumstances can be dire and difficult, but what I'm emphasizing is that legalized abortion from its inception was never to do with the health of a woman, a diagnosis of a child that would be unhealthy, or rape. It was abortion at all costs, on demand. A great question that just came in from Simply Mary on Instagram is, can you mention some great pro-life books? Yes, I can. A number of books I highly recommend, and I'll have to actually do a post on social media later tonight or tomorrow. I'll take a snapshot of some of my favorite books. But one excellent book that is a classic that stands the test of time is Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Arguments by Randy Alcorn. Excellent book. And you can go through just argument, response. It's really great. Another great book that's a little bit more of a story type of defense of life is Trent Horn's Persuasively Pro-Life. Those are two of the top books coming to mind at this time. That said, I hope that you will listen regularly to some of our pro-life content. We do full shows talking about acronyms such as SLED, how to defend your pro-life position more. So if you have a question on abortion, we'd be happy to take it here on Trending. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio. We're happy to take your questions. 1-888-914-9149. If you or someone you know has been through an abortion, please know of the resource rachelsvineyard.org. That's rachelsvineyard.org. We'll include a link in the podcast notes. And if you or someone you know is facing an unplanned pregnancy, there is a crisis helpline available to you. You can call 1-800-395-4357. We've also posted that on social media. We were talking just a moment ago about the reality of abortion, and one of the speakers today at the March for Life was the popular podcast host of a Bible in the Year podcast, Father Mike Schmitz, and he shared about how he gave his very first speech when he was in 8th grade, and he gave it talking about abortion and euthanasia, and he talked about how he grew up in a very pro-life home and how one of the photos on his refrigerator growing up was a photo of a baby, should I say, in a garbage bag. Babies who had been aborted. And him sharing that was a reminder. And I know this is a controversial topic, a reminder of the importance of understanding and truly knowing what abortion is. I have spoken to secular, Christian, Catholic, and even pro-life groups to break down what abortion is, telling them what different types of abortion are, the main arguments for life. And time again, especially in pro-life and Catholic settings, I can't tell you how many times people have told me, I didn't know that's what abortion was. And although I've always been pro-life, my heart has been broken by this issue now, seeing what's occurring to these babies, what these mothers are enduring. And we veil it in the name of choice. And so the fact that Father Mike Schmitz shares that he was partially inspired by his pro-life movement by this photo on the fridge of what abortion actually is, of aborted baby parts, is a reminder of how important it is when we're passing on the pro-life movement to use images in educational settings. I'm not going to get into the debate of using images, of graphic images in a public setting, but what I'm saying is that's also my story. I grew up in a pro-life home. And when I was about 12, 13, even growing up in a very pro-life home, my mom worked actively in the pro-life movement. I was even volunteering as a little kid on many of the projects she was working on. We would pray in front of the abortion clinic. They were involved in legal work and political lobbying. My mom helped write pro-life laws and bills. Even in the face of all of that, I remember when I was about 12 or 13, really simple brain attitude. I sat here and thought, well, if a mom doesn't want her baby, if a baby is going to be unwanted or improperly cared for or poor or abused, why can't a woman, in my head, quote, just not have their baby? I was equating abortion with just not having their baby. Now, grant, I was 12 or 13, but a lot of people think that that's what they can do with abortion. I'm just not going to have this baby. They acknowledge that that's a baby in the womb, but they're just not going to have it because it's inconvenient, it's unwanted, it's untimely. Circumstances, that is changeable circumstances and changeable quality of life, are used to abort children. But when I was 13 years old, I saw a video, The Truth About Abortion. And I saw physically what happens in an abortion. I saw the aftermath of babies as young as 7 weeks and younger. Babies as old as 20 weeks and further who had been aborted. And I knew for me that was the moment that my life changed. I knew that I would always speak up for the unborn. I, at the time, was dancing. Some of you may know I danced all throughout high school. I danced with the Kirov, the Russian ballet company, in their summer programs, and danced with our local ballet company. And from before then, I always thought, I'll dance, I'll do this, and that'll be my career. Well, when I saw the reality, the images of what abortion was, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I couldn't imagine speaking up for anything else. Because that's the reality. Children in the womb are being brutally murdered, torn to pieces. Their mothers' lives are being destroyed. Their souls are being ravaged and damaged in such a profound way. To be pro-life is to be feminist, to be pro-woman. To be pro-life is to save babies, to save women, and to save the future of not just thousands, but millions of people. This is why the overturning of Roe versus Wade is so important. This is why praying in front of the abortion clinic is so important. This is why fasting for an end to abortion is so important. This is why speaking up about our pro-life convictions, even when it's uncomfortable, is so important. I can think of 2 times in my life that, shockingly, people were making jokes about abortion in front of me, knowing I was pro-life. One time was a distant family member making abortion jokes in front of me because they knew I was pro-life and they thought it was funny. Another was, I remember a family member posted on social media making a joke about abortion, posted that he was at an abortion clinic. To which the crisis pregnancy mode swooped in to find that it was only a joke, to which he admitted was a really bad joke. This is an example of how even when it's awkward, even when it's people we love, we know it's situations that may seem harmful, that we still have to speak up for life. We need to be willing to do anything to save the lives of babies. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie here on Relevant Radio. Let's talk for a moment about the real aftermath of abortion. One of the speakers at the March for Life in Washington, D.C. today was the Duck Dynasty reality TV star Lisa Robertson. Now, it's been a little while. I don't even know, does Duck Dynasty still air? I haven't seen it. I know a lot of people were really into it, got some kicks and giggles. I don't think it's off air anymore. Anyways, Lisa Robertson, along with the Duck Dynasty family, are extremely pro-life. But she shared a very profound story about having been through an abortion herself many years ago and the long-term aftermath it had on her body. Listen to this.
I was 16, pregnant, unwed, vulnerable, and desperate to believe their lies. I was told 3 lies that day in the abortion clinic, 3 lies that would impact my life and the life of my unborn child. The first is it's just a glob of tissue, but that was a lie because we know that life begins at conception. The second was I was told your body will heal and be as good as new in a couple of days. That also was a lie. My body was never the same, and I was never able to carry a child to full term. The third, when you leave here today, you can forget this day ever happened. Again, that was a lie. That was 40 years ago, and every day of my life, I think of that day. These lies and many others nearly cost me my life, my family, my children that I carried and birthed. It did cost me 2 children and generations of grandchildren. But God rescued me, He forgave me, He redeemed me, and He also gave me a voice to speak out for the unborn.
What a powerful testimony. I know it can be really hard to hear the stories of women who have had an abortion. And if you yourself have been through an abortion, know there's hope and healing. Praise God for the sacrament of reconciliation, the absolute gift of God's mercy. Go to confession if you haven't before. And also check out the resource rachelsvineyard.org for hope and healing after an abortion, even if it's been 3 years ago, last week, or 30 years ago. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie here on Relevant Radio. That was the testimony of reality TV star from the show known as Duck Dynasty, that is Lisa Robertson, sharing that she herself had an abortion when she was 16 years old. She said she was told a number of lies, that it's just a blob of tissue, that her body would heal and be as good as new within a couple days of the abortion, and also that she can forget that that day the abortion ever happened. She shared that she, every day of her life, has thought back to having had that abortion, but she also emphasized that her body was never the same. She was never able to carry future children to a full-term pregnancy. She lost children. She saw her life, her body. She almost died, she said. This is a woman sharing what the real aftermath of abortion is and was and will continue to be if abortion is allowed to be legal in the United States. Listen to the long-term impact that no one's talking about. Yesterday here on Trending, we talked about post-abortion syndrome. That is just the interpersonal psychological dimension of how abortion impacts women. I hope you'll go to our podcast, subscribe at relevantradio.com/trending to listen to that podcast where we discuss. Now, I want to talk now about the lie of genetic testing. Just a couple weeks ago, it was revealed through the New York Times, of all places, that the genetic test, the chromosomal testing, the blood test that's done on babies in the womb, that 85% of those prenatal blood tests are providing false positive results. That 85% of all positive results, that is, results where it claims that this child has some sort of chromosomal genetic predisposition damage, that this baby might not, quote, live through the full pregnancy, that the baby might not live after birth, that the baby might have Down syndrome, among other things. 85% of those blood tests, it is now known, are false positives. This is absolutely unacceptable. You see, I talked about this on the show, and you can listen to the podcast. It's available now. It's the latest podcast on Trending with Timmerie, where I discuss the lie of genetic testing. I know people who are incredibly pro-life, but every time they're pregnant and they approach the time for that genetic test for their baby, they become extremely anxious, stressed, mournful of what could be wrong with their baby. And even in the cases of people who have been pro-life, I've even seen this thought, well, what if something's wrong? Do I really want to go through with this? You see, these prenatal tests, these blood tests, are wrong, and they were created specifically for the purpose of participating in eugenics, that is, killing babies through abortion. They're not life-saving, and they're, more commonly than not, false diagnoses. In fact, I want to share with you the testimony of one woman who called and shared how she had a genetic test and what happened to her baby after receiving that diagnosis. Listen to this.
This is 28 years ago, and I did choose a pro-life doctor, but unfortunately I was sent somewhere else to this lab, to the hospital, to have the testing taken, my blood taken, and I was informed about the results by a nurse. And the nurse was trying to talk me into having amniocentesis because she said that there's a 50% chance that my child would be born with Down syndrome. And I said, I'm very pro-life. There is no way. I love my child.
Praise God.
I have a son. I said, I love him very much no matter what. And it turns out my son was born. He learned to read. He really started reading at 1. He's a genius.
Wow.
He started reading signs and things. And he knew all his letters. I mean, he's super, super smart, but he's super normal. He's very humble, on top of his class, and super successful now. But
Praise God. Now, did he end up having Down syndrome, kid. Janet?
No, he's extremely, he's brilliant. Wow. He's a genius.
Wow. This is an incredible testimony of just one woman of many who have said they received a false diagnosis. She was told 50% chance her son would have Down syndrome. He didn't have Down syndrome. He was born perfectly healthy, an incredibly intelligent little boy. People are commenting in droves on social media right now that they passed up doing genetic testing, that it only brought anxiety. They didn't do it. Another person commented that her parent was told, her mom was told that she should be aborted due to developmental disability. She is completely healthy and fine. So here's the reality. People are being lied to. And in fact, the lie is so outrageous. Do you know that there's a population of society that has been aborted at a rate of almost 9 out of 10 due to these falsified genetic tests? I'll be right back here on Trending to share with you a little bit about this. Today's show is sponsored by Colby Academy. With more than 40 years of experience in Catholic home education, Colby Academy offers a blend of classical Catholic curriculum and the latest educational technology. More info at relevantradio.com/Colby.
We're talking about what you're thinking about. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
We are marking this week the anniversary of the Supreme Court decision of Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton, making abortion legal and legal through all 9 months of a woman's pregnancy. We've been sharing some of the testimonies from the March for Life that occurred in Washington, D.C. If you did not see, if you did not hear, if you were not there, no, you are not alone in the pro-life movement. The pro-life movement is loud, it is joyful, and it came out in droves at the March for Life in Washington, D.C. today, and will be again in San Francisco at the West Coast Walk for Life, and in many other places across the nation where walks and marches are occurring, including One Life LA and Los Angeles. So if you're in California, No, One Life LA in Southern California, as well as the West Coast Walk for Life in San Francisco, are happening on the 22nd on the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. Did you know that more than 9 out of 10 babies diagnosed with Down syndrome are aborted in the United States? You just heard the testimony of one woman who was told that her son had a 50% chance of Down syndrome. She was recommended to abort, just like many people today. But this falls in line with the breaking news that came out a couple weeks ago about genetic testing, the fetal genetic testing that occurs having to do with chromosomal disorders, Down syndrome, all these things, that they have 85% of the positive tests claiming that something's wrong with the child are false positives. We hear a lot about false negatives, etc., false positives today surrounding COVID. Well, let's talk about a test that determines or leads and encourages people to have their baby or not have their baby. What I'm talking about is have an abortion or not have an abortion. The vast majority of people are choosing to have an abortions when they receive a diagnosis that their child is less than healthy in their eyes. Did you know that you can refuse genetic tests? It only brings anxiety and frustration. I refuse them. Many people commenting even live right now on social media are saying they too refuse these. And when they did do them, they received diagnoses that claimed that something was wrong and nothing was wrong. But let's come back to this Down syndrome issue. More than 9 out of 10 babies diagnosed with the Down syndrome are aborted in the United States. The testimony, the numbers are the same in Britain. Nearly all babies with Down syndrome are aborted in Denmark. In fact, they celebrate this. In 2016, according to official figures, 137 babies were diagnosed with Down syndrome in Denmark. 133 of those babies were aborted. Only 4 babies were allowed to live once a possible diagnosis of Down syndrome was given. As we just heard the testimony of one woman just a couple minutes ago, her child was perfectly healthy and brilliant and did not have Down syndrome. People are being gypped of motherhood, they are being lied, and they are being manipulated into having abortions. Yes, medical technology is amazing. However, it's not perfect. It should not determine whether or not we decide for ourselves whether or not someone will live and die based on a quality of life that we determine we don't like. And we have to remember that the medical profession on a whole has very pro-abortion stances. This is why seeing a pro-life doctor is so important, and making sure that your loved ones see a pro-life doctor as well. One of the speakers at the March for Life in Washington, D.C. today was Katie Shaw. She's a Down syndrome advocate. She herself has Down syndrome. She's 36 years old, and she shared an incredible testimony that she works full-time. She enjoys family, friends, sports, books clubs, and a pro-life activist. And she said something that I did not know. This is fascinating. I had no idea. She said, I knew that there is a massive waiting list for people who are waiting to adopt children. People wait as long as 10 years. I have dear family members right now who have been waiting years to adopt children. Maybe you or someone you know is waiting as well. Well, she shared that there's actually a long waiting list specifically for people who want to bring into their home a child with Down syndrome whose parents couldn't otherwise raise those children. Parents who made the heroic choice to place their child for adoption. This is very important because, as I mentioned, we've learned that 85% of those so-called positive tests surrounding genetic testing, chromosomal disorders, child being brain dead, having Down syndrome are false. So please go now, subscribe to my podcast, Trending with Timmerie, wherever you catch your podcasts or on the Relevant Radio app. And there you can listen to the testimony and stories of how genetic testing is stealing the lives of the unborn today. And if you or someone you know is facing an unplanned pregnancy, call now 1-800-395-4357 to get resources. So here's the question. We're marking now the 49th anniversary of Roe versus Wade. Next year, it will be 50 years of legalized abortion across the United States. The question all of us may be asking ourselves, whether we've been involved in the pro-life movement, haven't done much, or want to do more. What are we going to do to save lives and end abortion? A handful of ideas off the top of my head: praying in front of an abortion clinic, It's your legal right. Begin sidewalk counseling if you feel so called. Support financially pro-life organizations. Provide pro-life materials at your parish and schools. Christian, secular, public, you name it. Kids need this help. Get involved in pro-life advocacy at your state legislature. Become a lobbyist for life. Work on social media for a pro-life organization, or whatever skills and gifts you may have, volunteer it or maybe convert to working for a pro-life organization. Share the stories face-to-face, via text message, on social media, about women who have chosen life, the impact of abortion. Share them on social media. Share about women's homes that help women who otherwise faced unplanned pregnancies. When I was just a little girl, my parents opened a maternity home for women who were facing unplanned pregnancies. My first pro-life encounter, I remember, was of a little boy whose mother had been a part of the drug cartel, and she found herself pregnant. She found a safe haven in the crisis pregnancy maternity home, and she was able to choose life and then give birth to her baby and place her baby in the arms of a loving family who could keep him safe from not just the abortion, but the culture of the drug cartel that she had been exposed to. You see, there's so many stories, inspiring, challenging, joy-filled, that we can share with people to help end this culture of abortion. But at the end of the day, I want to remind all of us, what's most important, alongside prayer, is that we tell the truth. Jesus Christ himself said that the truth will set us free. So tell the truth about abortion. To be pro-life is feminist, it's pro-woman. It saves women's lives, literally. It saves their future, it saves babies, it makes families. The lie must end with us. We will see one day Roe versus Wade overturned, perhaps this year. We will see an end to abortion. We have work to do to change the hearts and minds of a culture who has made this so permissive. But the pro-life movement is live, it's young, and it is the future.